China spent the last 20 years building cities at a pace no country in history has ever matched. By 2021, real estate was nearly a quarter of its entire economy. Today, an estimated 80 million apartments sit empty, enough to house every person in Germany, the United Kingdom, and France combined. New home prices have now fallen for 34 months in a row. The world's most indebted developer just got formally erased from the stock market, and the bill is coming due. Using data from China's own Statistics Bureau, the World Bank, and the Bank for International Settlements, here is the slow-motion collapse of the world's biggest housing market, and why the numbers underneath it are worse than the headlines suggest. To understand what is breaking, start with what was built. In 1998, China stopped giving housing to its citizens through state-owned work units. Almost overnight, a country of more than 1.2 billion people had to start buying their own homes. The result was the largest property market on Earth and the largest construction boom in human history. Between 2000 and 2020, Chinese developers built more new housing than the entire existing U.S. stock combined. The cement numbers are easier to picture. In just 3 years, from 2011 through 2013, China poured more concrete than the United States did in the entire 20th century. Hundreds of millions of people moved from villages into cities, and every one of them needed somewhere to live. Local governments, given the right to sell land used to developers, found their single biggest source of revenue. Land sales paid for roads, subways, schools, hospitals, and salaries. Developers borrowed cheaply from state-owned banks and lightly regulated trust companies. Buyers, told that prices only went up, took out mortgages to lock in tomorrow's home today. By 2021, real estate and related industries accounted for roughly 24% of China's GDP. About 1 in every 4 yuan of national output passed through a building site or a property sale. That is far above any other major economy. In the United States, real estate is closer to 17% of GDP. In Germany, around 13%. China was an extreme outlier, and the model worked because everyone believed it would. Developers pre-sold apartments before construction even started, using buyers' deposits to fund the next project. Households poured savings into property, treating an empty flat in a third-tier city as a retirement plan. Local governments piled on hidden debt, off their official books, through entities called local government financing vehicles, betting that future land sales would pay it all off. 3 trillion yuan, then 5 trillion, then more than 130 trillion. For 2 decades, China's property sector was a perpetual motion machine, bigger every year, funded by debt, justified by growth. But the math depended on prices that never stopped rising and a population that never stopped urbanizing. By 2020, both assumptions were starting to wobble. So what finally broke the machine? It was not the market. It was Beijing itself. In August 2020, with developer debt spiraling, Chinese regulators drew what they called the 3 red lines. They were balance sheet rules, limits on a developer's leverage, on its short-term debt, and on its total liabilities. Cross too many of them, and you could no longer borrow. The intention was to defuse a bubble before it exploded. What it did in practice was pull the plug on the biggest builders almost at once. The first casualty was the largest of them. China Evergrande was the most indebted real estate company on the planet, with more than $300 billion of liabilities, offshore bonds, bank loans, supplier IOUs, and prepaid apartments owed to ordinary buyers. By the end of 2021, it was missing offshore bond payments. A Hong Kong court ordered it liquidated in January 2024. In August 2025, after years of failed restructuring attempts, Evergrande was delisted from the Hong Kong exchange. It was formally erased from the world's capital markets. It was not alone. Country Garden, once China's biggest seller by floor area, is now working through a debt restructuring of about $190 billion. According to China Index Holdings, at least 77 Chinese developers have defaulted since 2020. More than $140 billion of dollar-denominated property bonds, over 70% of the total, are in default or being restructured. This is where the second-order damage starts. Pre-sold apartments stop getting built. Suppliers and contractors do not get paid. Migrant workers go home without their wages. In a 2022 wave, buyers across more than 100 Chinese cities staged a mortgage strike, refusing to repay loans on unfinished homes. Property investment, which had grown almost every year since the late 1990s, fell roughly 10% in 2022, then 10% again in 2023, and collapsed another 17% in 2025 alone. New home sales by floor area are now running at roughly half of their 2020 peak. The model that demanded perpetual building has run out of builders willing to build. And here is what surprised even the economists who had warned about this for years. The crackdown did not pop the bubble with a bang. It deflated it slowly. The correction has now stretched into its fifth year, with no obvious bottom in sight. Which leads to the question on every Chinese household's mind. If developers built all this time, where did the apartments actually go? The answer is everywhere and nowhere. The phrase "ghost city" became famous in the 2010s when reporters visited freshly built districts in places like Inner Mongolia and found empty streets, dark windows, and almost no residents. At the time, it looked like a curiosity, a strange feature of central planning. Today it looks like a warning. How many vacant homes does China actually have? No one knows exactly, because the government does not publish a national vacancy figure. But several estimates land in the same range. He Kang, a former deputy head of China's Statistics Bureau, said publicly in 2023 that even China's 1.4 billion people would not be enough to fill all the homes already built. Some former officials have argued the empty stock could house 3 billion people. Independent analysts working from electricity use data, satellite imagery, and developer disclosure settle on a more conservative number, somewhere between 65 and 80 million empty apartments. 80 million units is roughly the entire housing stock of Germany, the United Kingdom, and France combined. It is more than every home in California, Texas, and Florida added together. The vacancy is heaviest where prices once rose fastest, third and fourth-tier cities, often in inland provinces, where developers built towers on the bet that the local population would keep migrating and getting richer. For many of those cities, that wave never came. Prices show the same picture. Across China's 70 major cities, the official new home price index has now fallen for 34 consecutive months as of April 2026, according to the National Bureau of Statistics. That is the longest losing streak in the history of the series. The pace has actually accelerated in 2026, not eased. Even the largest cities are no longer safe. In April 2026, Shanghai prices were still rising about 3.7% year-over-year, an outlier. But Beijing was down 2.3%. Guangzhou, down 4.4%. Shenzhen, China's tech capital and once the country's most valuable property market, was down 5.3%. The headline figures come from official data. Independent estimates of actual transaction prices are typically worse, with peak-to-trough drops reported in the 20 to 30% range in many cities. For Chinese families, this is not just bad news in the abstract. It is the value of the single biggest thing they own, which is the third piece of the story and the one that ties it all together. In China, housing is not just a place to live. It is the household savings account. Multiple central bank and academic surveys put the share of urban Chinese household wealth held in real estate at roughly 70%. In the United States, the comparable figure is closer to 30%. In Japan, around 40%. Chinese households are, by global standards, extraordinarily overexposed to one asset class, and that asset class is now falling. The wealth effect of a 5-year decline is enormous. When prices were rising, people felt richer, opened businesses, bought cars, sent children to private schools. When prices fall, that confidence reverses. Retail sales have weakened. Younger Chinese, watching their parents' main asset deflate, are saving more and spending less. The country has slipped in and out of consumer price deflation, with overall prices falling year over year for several months running, something the world's second-largest economy was supposed to have left behind decades ago. Then there is the second balance sheet. Beijing's central budget is in reasonable shape. The provinces, cities, and counties are not. They long depended on selling land use rights to developers as their single largest source of revenue. Now, with developers either bankrupt or refusing to bid, that revenue has collapsed. In 2025, China's residential land sale revenue was running about 65% below the 2021 peak, according to Caixin. Total residential land sales fell from roughly $1.2 trillion at the peak to under $350 billion in 2025. The off-balance sheet debt those local governments accumulated through their financing vehicles is staggering. Independent analysts put total LGFV debt at around $19 trillion when you tally up loans, bonds, and hidden liabilities. That is larger than the entire economy of any country except China itself and the United States. Goldman Sachs estimates the property downturn alone shaved roughly 2 percentage points off China's annual GDP growth in 2024 and 2025. Without that drag, China would have been growing closer to 7%. With it, official growth is closer to 5%, and even that figure is widely questioned. Goldman expects the drag to narrow to about 0.5 percentage point per year going forward, but not to disappear. The data tells one story very clearly. The property bust did not just hit developers. It punched a hole through Chinese household wealth, through local government budgets, and through national growth, all at the same time. So what does Beijing actually do about it? The answer, so far, is less than the West expected. In 2024, the central government launched a roughly $42 billion program for state-linked entities to buy unsold homes and convert them into affordable housing. That sounds large until you compare it to the size of the problem. Independent estimates of what it would actually cost to clear the inventory range from $500 billion to more than $1 trillion. The bailout, in other words, is about 1/10 the size of the whole. Beijing has been deliberate about that. The leadership has repeated again and again that housing is for living, not for speculation. The goal is no longer to reinflate the bubble. It is to manage the deflation, slowly enough to avoid a banking panic, but fast enough that capital can flow into the sectors China actually wants to dominate next: semiconductors, electric vehicles, batteries, AI hardware, and solar. The contrast is striking. While property investment fell 17% in 2025, investment in manufacturing, especially high-tech manufacturing, has been running positive. China is, in effect, trying to swap an economy built on apartments for one built on factories and exports. That pivot helps explain why headline GDP keeps printing around 5% even with the property sector imploding. The official data masks a split-screen economy. There is also a slow demographic reality underneath all of this. China's population peaked in 2022 and has been shrinking ever since. Urbanization, while not finished, has dramatically slowed. Even if every Chinese family wanted to upgrade tomorrow, there are simply not enough new buyers in their 20s and 30s to absorb the existing stock. Some of those empty apartments, many of them, will never be filled. They will be discounted, repurposed, or eventually demolished. None of this is the explosive crash that some observers predicted in 2022. The Chinese state has shown it can prevent a Lehman-style moment. What it cannot do, at least not yet, is conjure demand that no longer exists. So watch 3 numbers from here: whether new home prices stop falling, whether land sale revenue stabilizes, and whether household savings rates start to come back down. Until those 3 turn, the world's biggest building boom is still slowly unwinding. China did not just build apartments. It built an economic system that depended on them. Now it has to learn how to grow without it. If you want the data behind Asia's biggest stories before they reach the headlines, subscribe to Asia by the Numbers. One new number on the region's economy every week. Which Asian property market do you think breaks next? Tell us below. See you in the next one.